The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
What's going on? Welcome to another edition of NBA Today. I'm your host, Corbin Ford, and listen, you have a treat today, or at least you have a treat. I have to include myself in this too. I got co-founder and director of scouting for Red Team Scouting, personal friend, podcast mentor, the guy who actually got me my first startup as a guest on a pod all the way back when, Mr. Alex West. Alex, man, how are you doing?
You're just giving me way too much credit. Now I feel like I have a lot to live up to, and I don't know if I can do it. So thanks for just weighing that down on me right at the start, giving me like this lofty goal I got to live up to. But I'm doing good, buddy. I'm doing good. How about you?
You know, man, I'm doing good. I can't complain. You know, at the end of the day, getting a chance to talk hoops and trying to find some semblance of normal and all the craziness is great. And I mean, you know, I'd love to talk about a better team than the Cleveland Cavs, but that's the team we got today. So I'm excited to kind of get that started with you. We're just gonna do a full kind of off-season preview / review of the Cavs and how they've been this year. And I mean, obviously, you know, one of the bottom teams in the East finished 19-46, bottom in both offensive and defensive rating. I mean, here's the thing. I'm just going to throw it to you, Alex. Initial thoughts when you think Cleveland Cavs this year, having watched all the film that you have and just knowing what you know about this team.
I think there are a couple big things here that you have to talk about. And the number one thing right off the top for me, Corbin, is there's no way to bury the lead on this. They drafted Colin Sexton in 2018. They drafted Darius Garland in 2019. They also drafted Kevin Porter Jr. Now, if you take the amalgamation of those players, that's one good NBA player. They all have different variations of what they are. But essentially, you're looking at combo guards, a little bit of off-ball utility, a little bit of creation, but not enough to be a primary initiator. So it's a really weird group of guys. And I think that's the big thing for the Cleveland Cavs. Like, you know, 1946, obviously season over, didn't make the bubble. There's the Kevin Love trade, which hangs over everything. There's Andre Drummond, which we will get into, which is a trade that made a lot of sense, but where does it go? What does it lead to? What's the next step? I think there are just really big questions hanging over them, but none bigger than who are these three guys? Can we build around all of them? Can we build around any of them? And I think that's something that, you know, there's not going to be an easy answer to.
Yeah, honestly, that has been, I mean, you said it, you can't bury the lead on it. It's been the most compelling. It's been the most poignant. It's been the big piece of this team, just watching the attempted rebuild, part two, sans LeBron leaving. And this route, you know, you start off, like you said, with the drafting of Colin Sexton, and, you know, you shooting guard sort of and a point guard body. You know, he has the ball for so much, but I don't think that he's a super great passer. I mean, forget just the raw 3 assists a night. Just in general, I feel like he's very much of a ball pounder, even though he scores pretty well and he had a market improvement this year from 3. And then you kind of compound that with another guard, Darius Garland, who definitely has better passing ability, I'd say, than Sexton in my own opinion, but is pretty much cut from the same cloth. And you say, okay, we're going to build with these two young guys who aren't great defenders and pretty much do the exact same thing, and then have another guard who I think is a little more promising, another guard / forward in Kevin Porter. And it's like, these pieces, I don't know if I see the next great Cavs team kind of coming from the ashes, starting with these three as the foundation.
Yeah, that's the thing. So you've got these two guys, and you hear this comparison all the time. You hear, okay, well, the Blazers did it with Dame and CJ, or the Raptors did it with Lowry and Van Vliet. You can play 2 point guards together, or you can play 2 smaller guards together. But the thing about these two guys that makes it a little more difficult is neither one of them, with Fred Van Vliet and Kyle Lowry, you've got 2 of the smartest off-ball position defenders in the league, guys who can, you know, play at that point of attack, but off the ball can still be disruptive. Just really, really great defensive IQ. With the Blazers duo, you have 2 guys who can initiate the offense, who can get into the lane, who can create havoc, create warps, be able to attack the defense, and create for other players. With Sexton and Garland, you don't really have either of those things. You don't have a great penetrator. You don't have a guy who gets to the line a lot, and you don't have that defensive prowess. So the idea that you can build or construct a roster that has any semblance of being a playoff roster around these guys is a tough sell for me where I'm sitting right now. And I went through it, and like you said, Sexton much improved this year. Showed he could shoot the ball, particularly as a catch and shoot guy. He was really nice at doing a lot of things. I mean, but you hit the nail on the head. He's not a pass first player. He's not even a player who can create with passing. In fact, he's 4th percentile in assist percentage among guards. Whoa. He's 2nd percentile when you compare assist to usage percentage. So, those aren't great numbers to look at for your lead guard. And I think the Cavs actually kind of figured that out late in his rookie season. And they moved him off the ball a little bit more. And like you said, there has been some success, particularly with his shooting splits. I mean, he shot 38% from 3 this year. That is unbelievable. That's a really great clip for a guy, who's 6'1", 6'2", probably being defended by a 2 guard, did a lot of nice catch and shoot work. He also has always been a good free throw shooter, even at Alabama. There was room to see that kind of improvement. But here's the thing. Mm-hmm. So you get a guy with Sexton who doesn't really have the body of a 2 guard. He doesn't really have the skills of a 1 guard. He was not good this year in pick and rolls. He only got free throws about 9% of the time out of pick and rolls per synergy this year, which is not great for somebody who's initiating. And the dichotomy is that, like, okay, well, he's creating shots. He's low percentile in points generated. He's 36th percentile in points generated, which is points plus assists. But he's 65th percentile as a scorer. So obviously he can put the ball in the hole. Okay, that's great. You kind of know who this player is. You kind of get a picture of him. And then you flip over on the other side, and you have Darius Garland. Now, Garland was a player that we were particularly infatuated with. And funnily enough, my partner Estacio at Red Team Scouting, big Cavs fan.
Okay.
But the unfortunate part is we didn't love the fit with Sexton. Garland only played 5 games in college at Vanderbilt. Okay. And the only team that he really got to play against that was of a high quality was USC with Kevin Porter Jr. actually. And
ironic.
Yeah. And so there wasn't a lot to work with there, but what we did see in the film was, here's a guy with great catch and shoot ability. Okay, well, you know what? We've actually kind of seen that. Now, his shooting splits haven't been spectacular, but he shot 35%, got to show, I think he shot about 40.7% in catch and shoots this year, which is pretty damn good for a guy his size. And so, but here's the flip side of that Darius Garland coin, and we knew this going in. Garland is not a player who can get into the lane and initiate. So you've got Sexton, good shooter, a guy who can do a little bit of some things, doesn't really create for teammates. Now you've got Garland, who doesn't really warp the defense, doesn't really get into the lane. In fact, he gets to the line 1.2 times per game and has the lowest free throw rate among guards with greater than a 20% usage. So that's kind of the problem in a nutshell, is we don't really know what it is these 2 guys do well separately. And then when you put them together, now you have, however many amount of minutes, say they're playing 60 minutes a game in the 1 and 2 spot there, of that we don't really know what's going on.
And see, that makes it, I mean, you just did a thorough breakdown on just these young players of the future, mainly just the 3 between Sexton and Garland and a little bit of Porter as well. But my thing is, as bad as Garland was, and you mentioned some of him just not having a lot of playing against high level competition, in the sense that he only played those 5 contests in Vanderbilt. He was already a step behind starting along in Cleveland, kind of playing catch up there. So
came off an injury. I mean, he missed the beginning part of the season, the early parts of the season with injury.
So the curve, it's a longer curve for him. But I guess the thought for me is, did you see? I mean, it doesn't sound. You sound obviously measured in your take on Garland, but is there hope that, okay, there was, I mean, I watched a little, not nearly half as much, but a few games of him, some big ones, some just random games, and it seemed like there was some potential flash of the guy they drafted so high. Do you think, and my own opinion is no in this case, but that there is a scenario or a future with these 2 where the Cavs can play both Sexton and Garland long term. Because right now, the optimist in me says, right now, Garland, a horrible rookie season, yes, but we still don't know his full potential. We still don't. I'm going against hope about them being undersized, horrible defensively, and like two cuts from the same cloth. But from a superior scouting perspective, just kind of knowing like the playing style, is there like a situation or a world where they can in fact be, as you referenced, a Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry, or a CJ McCollum, Dame Lillard scenario?
Well, I think that's the model that they're always going to try to build on. That you can look at these teams across the league, and there's no right construction. Talent is the number one thing. It's not about I got to have a two guard that looks like this. I got to have a big that looks like this. It's about finding what your niche is, and perhaps this was the market inefficiency from where Kobe Altman was sitting. Sexton was enticing. There was a lot to love in that 2018 class. I mean, they picked up that pick in the trade that sent Kyrie Irving to Boston. That was kind of the jewel of it, because none of the other pieces ended up being that great. And even that didn't end up being what they wanted to be. But when you look to Sexton, there was an enticing package. There was a guy who, above all else, just got after it. I mean, he, if you remember from that college season, he played in that infamous 3-on-5 game when they played against Minnesota, with everybody fouled out, and he really got after it. Now, there was a moment there in that game where you're like, are they going to come back and win this? And I think that's really what you're coming off of a successful run. You're coming off your first title. And I think it's going to be a down couple of years as you sort of rebuild and retool and reconstruct. And then you get a guy like Sexton who's kind of fiery, who's going to get after it, and has good guard skills. Okay. And then you get Garland next year. And I'm rounding into the answer for your question here, which is to say, yes, I think you can build a decent team around these two, but it takes some superior roster construction, and there are almost no pieces on this roster that exist in a way that is amplifying the talents of these two guys. I mean, we saw it early this season. You remember, and Corbin, it feels like the season was 1,000 years ago.
For real.
But you remember that Sexton and Kevin Love kind of got into it about getting Love the ball in spots that he liked, and then Love had so much to say about playing with these young guys, meaning Sexton and Garland, and it's just tough to see it because the roster is just not put together in any imaginable way to amplify these two guys. Now that can all change. You got the Andre Drummond's on a player extension a player option this year. Maybe he opts out. Maybe there's a little cap money. Maybe there's another high draft pick coming. They're sitting at number 2 in the rankings right now. So the pieces could be there, but man, from like you said, from where we're sitting right now, it's a ways off.
Oh yeah, it's rough. And I liked what you pointed out about the pieces around these guys, these guards specifically. And I actually want to kind of circle over to some other players. One I'm intrigued by, and I'm looking to get your take on in general, but that would be one Cedi Osman. He's 2 NBA seasons at this point. I don't really count his first one. I count it. It was his rookie season, but it was a lot of LeBron's last year. And I feel like rookies and young players on LeBron's teams, let's just face it, they're not getting ample development time. But at this point, he's 25 years old. He's proven that he has good three-point shooting numbers. I think he shot 38% overall. According to NBA.com, he shot 38.8% on catch-and-shoot threes this year. Defensively, it seems like he tries really well. And according to ESPN's DRPM metric, actually rates out better than players like Josh Hart or even like a Joe Harris. I guess I wouldn't say comps to him, but guys that I would think are quote-unquote possibly better defenders than him on paper. But at the same time, he's had some weaknesses. I know he played a lot at small forward and like a small ball 4, but he seemed to me to kind of be too small to play small ball 4, and he wasn't the greatest finisher around the rim. I know a lot of times he kind of just got there, which was great, and then it seemed like he kind of careened out of control. But I like his skill set as like a player who he doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective. And that's great because you're not going to get the ball often when, sadly, and this is, I guess, a good and a bad thing, when you have guys who will either great finishers or people who will demand the ball as far as like control of it in a Sexton, in a Garland, in Porter, in Kevin Love as he's around. So what do you think Osman kind of is as a player? Is he just a solid 3 and sort of D player? Is he someone who's a solid starter? I mean, is it just him being on a bad team that I'm sure obviously some of the skills like the 3-point shooting will probably translate, but just in general, is there anything to make of him 2 years in?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a semblance of a workable player there. The downside sort of with Cedi Osman is that he's in year 2 and he's 25 years old. I mean, that's like coming out of a senior year in college, that's that same kind of age. So the upside of looking forward to a guy, I mean, you look back at people who came into the league in 2017, and I'm just going to pull somebody at random here, but like players in the 2017 draft. Okay, the number 1 pick was Markel Fultz in that draft. Markel Fultz is 22. So that's, that when you think about, yes, he is in his second year in the league, and yes, he has professional experience overseas, but that upward curve that NBA guys tend to love, that idea that, youth plus athleticism is potential. Well, he's getting a little bit older in that curve, so that curve's kind of starting to flatten out. And I said that to say this: when you're 25 years old, for most guys, and this is not true for everybody, but for most guys, you're kind of who you are. And for Cedi Osman, that's a guy who, he can shoot the 3 ball. He's got some nice utility as a passer. He's more of a secondary passer, secondary creator, a guy who knows how to make the right passes and knows how to make some good reads. And he's an all right defender. I mean, there's certainly not many all right defenders on this Cavaliers squad, but I think he does well in spots. You probably don't want him to be your number 1 point of attack guy for wing players, which for a decent number of games this season against your Kawhi Leonards and your LeBron Jameses and your Paul Georges and your big wing creators, even guys like Gordon Hayward, he's going to draw those assignments a lot, and that's not really where you want him to be. But no. As a contributor on a good team, yeah, I think he's a piece. Now, let me couch that and say, I don't think Cedi Osman is a piece for this team. I think that he is somebody who can be sent out in a trade, maybe bring back an asset here or there. I think he's a little bit too they're going to need really specific skills. I mean, we talked about these 2 guys. If they're going to build around them, which maybe that's the right path, maybe it's not. But if you're going to build around these Garland and Sexton guys, you're going to need really specific wing defenders, similar to what Lloyd Pierce has done in Atlanta, and kind of constructed a roster around Trae Young with the idea that we need really rangy guys, we need switchable guys, and we need be able to cover a lot of distance to help Trae defensively. So that kind of similar mindset is how you have to approach this. And Osman's not really that kind of defender. He's not that rangy, switchable, super switchable, point of attack can contain guy that they really, really are going to need to sort of amplify all that talent.
Yeah, I can agree. I agree with a lot of what you're saying there, especially in the defensive end. I feel like he is someone who can be deployed in spots, but I hadn't thought about him possibly not being the best fit for this team. I thought, okay, he's not going to rate out as like some star or even like a really solid go-to player, but I mean, you would agree at least like a useful or as quality, maybe too strong a word of a rotation wing.
Yeah, I think so. And like you said, speaking of that, those minutes at the 4, he played about 13% of his minutes at the 4 this season, and the Cavs were an atrocious -20. Their rebounding really kind of suffered while he was playing the 4. So he probably is more of a 3, despite being listed at 6'8", which is something in the modern NBA we consider that to be, nearly a big, definitely a forward. He doesn't really profile that way. I think he's more of a guy who's going to play that 3, who's going to be defending wings, who's going to be doing a little bit more chasing and playing away from the basket.
I agree with a lot of that. I'm going to keep right on moving. You mentioned forwards. I'm going to use that as a very, very loose transition into some of the forwards on this team. I'm going to start, as a Lakers fan, I feel almost obligated to do so, with a former Laker forward who's sort of found his niche in Cleveland. We're going to talk about Larry Nance Jr. For one, I mean, you still getting the same dunks that you get from him, but I think he's kind of evolved into like a master of all trades. And for me, at least, from my rudimentary scouting or looking at him, I think one big thing was just his 3-point shooting, which he kind of flashed in seasons with LA and was kind of like, oh, I'll stretch out that far, maybe not. That's sort of like, when the opportunity arose. But he fully committed this year. Had 9 points on the year, 8.2 rebounds, 52% shooting from the field. I was really impressed with the 33.7% from three, which isn't a super great percentage, but for a big and particularly for Nance and evolving his shooting, I think that's pretty solid. And even more valuable as we start to talk later about Andre Drummond as far as spacing on the floor. But what do you think in terms of Nance in general? I feel like he was one of the few bright spots for the Cavs that played solid pretty much all year.
Yeah, I like Larry Nance. And I think, like you said, you touched on the three-point shooting. That's something he definitely had to offer. I think the biggest problem, Corbin, is that Larry Nance is probably a center, and he spent most of his minutes this year playing power forward. I mean, obviously, when you have Kevin Love, when you have Tristan Thompson, these guys on the roster, you're going to have to play multiple lineups with what we would consider to be multiple bigs. And that was, I think, kind of the issue. I mean, here's the problem when you look at these on-off stats, you look at the team stats, and you kind of start to take apart and parse the players. When a team is really, really bad, and the Cavs, I mean, we didn't really get to talk about this at the top, but look, you're talking 25th in offensive rating, 29th in defensive rating, 29th in effective, in difference. We're talking 30th in turnover percentage, 30th in free throw rate. Basically, what I'm getting at here is there's not a lot of bright spots, and when you're trying to take that overview picture, it's hard to say, okay, look, he was negative 3.4 points, per 100 possessions as a power forward. He's 7 points as a center. Well, what does that really mean? And so I kind of have to fall back on what I saw. And when I see Larry Nance, I see a good player who has that vertical spacing, who can hammer down those dunks like you're talking about, but a player who's managed to stretch his game and become a little bit of a pick and pop threat. And I think that if you want to, and this is here again, we're talking about the same thing as with Cedi Osman. He's 27 years old, so he's probably not on the timeline that they want him to be on, and now he's playing out of position. But like you said, there's a lot to like in this picture with Larry Nance, but again, it's just hard to find space for him playing with Drummond, playing with Love, playing with Tristan Thompson, and then also on the back end, not being a tremendous rim protector, good rim kind of deterrent, not a tremendous rim protector, not a guy who's going to throw up, 2 or 3 blocks a night. And I think that's something that he's a good piece, but you probably, like I said, if you're going to be dedicated to this, he's probably not a guy that's going to end up sticking around because he just doesn't fit with these two guys. And that becomes that's the refrain. That's kind of the chorus of what happens with Cleveland is okay, you're looking at good players. Cedi Osman, good, probably a rotation player. Larry Nance, I think, is a rotation player. Even what do you do with Andre Drummond, Kevin Love? The problem is there's no identity among these young guys. There's no, I buried the lead because I do want to do a whole Kevin Porter thing here, but we'll get to that in a second. But there's no real identity amongst this team in terms of what they're striving to become. And so I think, the players that suffer most from that are guys like Larry Nance and Cedi Osman, who could be contributing players on really good teams, but instead are kind of stuck in this idea where you're looking at their cleaning the glass page going, what does this guy do again? What does he do? There's so many minuses. There's so many little blue squares, but when I watch him, I see a decent player. So that's kind of that, cognitive dissonance you get with these guys, these good players ending up playing on teams that aren't great and can't really maximize what they do.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I was gonna say, you're talking about not having enough room for Nance in some of these lineups with these bigs with Kevin Love and Andre Drummond, but let's not forget they had a game just before the shutdown where Bernie Bickerstaff, and we have to talk about Bernie, or not Bernie. Bernie was the dad.
JB, yeah.
I'm living in the 80s now.
you are.
JB Bickerstaff rolled out a Larry Nance, Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson lineup against the Miami Heat with basically Nance playing the 3. Now, it worked. It was definitely unconventional. I don't think it's long-term, but I thought it was interesting that Bickerstaff was trying to do that. And the fact that, almost and again, I'm referencing the Lakers in this one, but, they played a lot of people out of position to develop them. Brandon Ingram played a lot of point guard back in 2017. You also had Nance do it some at small forward, but it was a glaring no-no back then, where now it's still not great. I mean, he just has nowhere near those kind of skills specifically, but it was at least something he could hide on, even though him chasing around Duncan Robinson was definitely kind of weird.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, what are you going to do with this guy? Where are you going to end up with him? And like I said, that's just this ever-present question with this Cleveland Cavaliers team that even as I watched film today when I was going through this, I'm like, what is this team? I mean, bad is the answer, but like what? That's not good enough for me to sit and look at. Like, I want to sit and look at, and I want to see, okay, they're trying to do this, they're trying to get here, they're trying to, and those things, obviously I didn't get to watch all 65 games, but as I watched film today, I just kind of wasn't getting what they were going for. And I think, there's just been a ton of turnover personnel-wise. There's been a ton of turnover in the coaching staff. You just get to the point where it's like, okay, we got to find an identity somewhere. And like I said, Nance, Osman, these guys are going to become the casualties of it. And hopefully it just becomes down the line for Cleveland, what can we recoup for Larry Nance? Because he probably is better served playing on another team. And we hope that there's a front office out there that wants to bite on him, who's maybe a playoff contender. Same with Jetty Osman. Same with Andre Drummond and Kevin Love, though they've sort of fallen in a different group. But you just got to hope you start recouping the losses here, because there aren't, outside of the pick, outside of the number 2 pick in the 2020 draft, which is a class that doesn't necessarily have that top tier talent like we've seen, particularly in the last 2 seasons with Zion and Luka, who were those just elite tier, and everybody kind of knew it except for apparently Phoenix. And Sacramento didn't know that Luka was the elite talent, but you don't have that Luka Doncic or that Zion Williamson this year, so they're still going to kind of be looking, kind of recouping losses, trying to figure out how to put a team on the floor that can do something, and we're going to spend a lot of time looking at this team, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the 2020 draft class at some point, and there are no perfect fits for this team, and there's not a guy who's going to come in and immediately fix all the problems. The ability, the not defending threes well, the not protecting the paint, not getting to the free throw line. There's no fix-all player anywhere, but particularly in this draft class that lacks that higher end talent. I think there are a lot of good players, but that higher end talent isn't immediately available. Like, you don't see it immediately when you watch this class like you did with guys like Luka and Zion. So it's a long road. But that's the very roundabout way to say I think there are going to be some casualties, and honestly, for Larry Nance, being a casualty of the Cavaliers experience may be the best thing for him. If he's playing next year with Dallas, playing with Maxi Kleber and Porzingis and Dwight Powell, and finds his place there, or goes here or goes there, ends up traded here or there as a piece. That's probably the best thing for him, because you get a little more structure, you get a little more idea as to what you want, what coaches want you to be, and maybe you get to play a little bit more center.
Of course, and you know what? Again, we're talking about casualties. I want to touch on the incumbent bigs with Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson, and then I really want to get back to your take on Kevin Porter Jr., because one, he's interesting, and then maybe kind of meander into the front office, because I think there's so much to dive into, Alex. Like, I'm glad to have you here kind of going in deep on this, because as weird as this team is, and as each player has some nuance and signs of promise or where they're at, it's so many different directions. And I mean, we haven't even covered John Beilein. I want to get your thoughts on that. I mean, it's so many different ways to go. So I'm gonna jump over to we can kind of take them in the same go, and then just kind of however deep you want to go in on this one, Alex. But in terms of Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, they were there for the glory days with the Cleveland is for you with LeBron. They've been kind of the veteran bigs who've been kind of guiding the young ones, maybe Tristan a little more than Kevin Love. Love's put up some good numbers, but I don't think his impact has been the same that it once was, especially thinking that I really thought this would be the year that he would build up some trade value and possibly trade to Portland or something, and it just never happened. And then for Tristan Thompson, he had almost like a renaissance that was very intriguing. As something to observe and look at as far as him flashing some more offensive potential, he averaged a career high 12 points a night on 51% shooting. I mean, it was solid. It almost felt like a fluke to me, but it was really good what he did. Career best numbers on points and rebounds. So in general, you could break it as you please or kind of take it as a whole. But what do you think about with these two bigs who I mean, ideally, I guess you would like to be gone from Cleveland at the end of the year if you're really trying to dedicate to the youth movement or whatever direction you're going for as far as kind of building from the ground up.
Thompson, I think there is a basketball argument to bring Thompson back. He does a lot of things really well. I mean, we saw how impressive he could be in those stretches playing in the LeBron era. He's a guy who there's this like group of rebounders, guys like Robin Lopez kind of falls into this same group that are really, really annoying. And I say that in like the nicest way possible. Tristan Thompson is so annoying because the thing that he does is he is consistently on the glass. He is, just imposing his will, making sure that maybe he's not beating you all the time, but you always have to be aware of where Tristan Thompson is. And that's reflected in his stats. He got 4 offensive rebounds a game this year. He's a guy who is just annoying. Now, I don't know, 28, 29 years old, if he's a guy who's going to want to hang around in this rebuild movement. He's a free agent this offseason. So there was a lot of talk about trading him. Nothing ever materialized. It's hard to say which direction that was. Did Cleveland really want him to come back? I think that's a very real possibility. Or, was there just nothing that really worked? And then, of course, they didn't end up buying him out. So I think Tristan Thompson still has some good skills that would really benefit this team, particularly as a roll man, vertical spacer, again, just being generally annoying. I think those are things that young teams look for, particularly if you start to kind of hone in on who your pick and roll guards are, or, even just screening for Garland and letting him kind of work off it. Something he did really early on at Vanderbilt and got into this year. He had kind of a renaissance late in the season and kind of found out who he was, being able to settle in behind screens and just knock down jumpers. So I can see a path where you want to keep Tristan Thompson on the roster. Now, I don't know that they're going to do that. And like I said, he doesn't really fit into the timeline, but there is a path there. As far as Kevin Love, I mean, man, this is the thing that we have been talking about. It feels like we've been talking about this for 2 whole seasons now. When, not if they're going to trade Love, just when and where. And, there's no great answer for this. I mean, the Portland is the name that gets floated around. You've heard Boston because they lack a big or whatever. I mean, you hear these names, but it comes down to this one thing for me is, do you view Kevin Love as an asset? And I'm asking you right now, do you view Kevin Love as an asset that teams want to acquire, or do you view him as something you have to attach an asset to get off the contract for? Because we're talking 3 years, $99 million still on this contract for a guy who's 31 years old, best days behind him, and I think that's the calculus that teams are kind of looking at.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I agree. I don't know. I think it's interesting in terms of it. I think it depends on the situation because, his stats across the board this season, defensive rebounding, 3-point shooting, it seemed in line with what he's done, in previous years. Now, mind you, he is 31. The chances of him continuing that or getting better are slim to none. It's definitely going to be due for a decline, but I would think that in the right situation, I really thought Portland would be that, or another playoff caliber team that can kind of hide his weaknesses and make better use of his strengths, especially on the offensive end, that Love could still make a difference. Now, that didn't happen in Cleveland. I mean, with him, he played in 56 of their 65 games, and you already mentioned being 26 in offensive rating, 29th in defensive rating. According to Clean the Glass, the Cavs are outscored by 7.7 points per 100 possessions when he's on the floor. So he's not helping this team at all. But I think that his skills, being a very high-quality stretch big who can kind of help on the glass, I don't think that he's yet turned into, let's say, Ryan Anderson yet. In terms of just can be played completely off the floor and is such a liability, he's out the league just because of his one end, despite being such a good shooter on the offensive end. But I do think that it depends on certain teams, especially trying to get the leverage. If I'm a Portland team, yeah, I probably do want Kevin Love, but yes, I'm going to treat him as if you need to attach a late pick or some type of player on the back end of it for me to make it feel like I'm getting worth my while, even if he's a good fit for my team, just because of the contract that you're trading with, that you're getting Kevin Love the player, and you're also getting this albatross of a contract that is such a big deal. And I mean, it's tragic to me just looking at Kevin Love because he got the deal. He said that this is where he wanted to be right after he inked it. And the minute he said that, I was like, oh no. And I mind you, with Cleveland, the minute John Beeline signed on, I was like, oh no. Like, there's a few things with Cleveland that I knew from the beginning were going to be like, this isn't going to work. But then you had him punching the seat in Toronto, chucking the ball at Chetty Osman, telling Colby Allman he had plenty of money when he was starting with the fine. Like, you're right, he needs to go. But I guess here I am rounding into my answer. I think it really just depends on the team. Because I do think in the right situation, he's a great asset. I wouldn't trade him to, like, Charlotte and expect him to give a good impact. But on these middling teams that could use an extra piece, he's not the bump that'll take you over the top. But I think he's like a really good complementary player who can help out as what he was in Cleveland, a really good third piece.
And I think therein lies the problem. When you're looking at a player who's got $99 million owed to him, it becomes this idea of like, can you construct a team, around a 33, where a team that you're paying, roughly 30-40% of your salary cap to this guy who doesn't really have that, if he doesn't block shots, he's not really a rim protector. He's really kind of a 4 or 5 tweener. So you start to look at those like construction elements, and it's really hard to see where he fits in. Now, without the deal, in a vacuum, in the non-contract world, I think there are a ton of places where Kevin Love makes a lot of sense. But when you start to look at where does he fit in terms of that $33 million, where's that $33 million go onto the cap sheet? Those options start to drop. Interestingly, and this is the last thing I'll say on Love, but interestingly, I do think he's a sort of a beneficiary of is a bad word. He is going to probably find more suitors in the lowered salary cap era. Obviously, with the virus and everything, the cap, we don't really know what's going to happen. But team control, having marketable stars is going to become an asset, particularly for middling market teams. And I think that Kevin Love can be the beneficiary. I think that some team, now I don't know that it's a good team, but some team is going to have an interest, and it may well be Cleveland. They may just think, okay, this is our guy. We're going to roll with him. We'll find a coach, be it J.B. Bickerstaff or whoever, who can sort of smooth out the wrinkles between Love and the young guys. But I do think he's a player who's going to benefit from the fact that the cap's not going to spike. Teams are going to have to look to make trades. There's going to be a sign and trade market. All these things sort of play in his favor in terms of getting out of Cleveland.
No, and that's true. And I mean, I guess it remains to be seen, like you said, what type of deal is going to be intriguing to monitor, especially given the situation and the fact that, I mean, in some cases, he's still an asset. I mean, you gave a really good compelling reason as to why to be a little more sour on it. And this year, I really thought would have been a make or break year to prove that hey, I could be traded. Like, I'm still playing well. So the numbers aren't super great in regards to, hey, I still put up good stats and my team kind of sucks. Trade for me, But all right, we're gonna get to like our last, I guess, main edition, and then kind of just look at it as an overview type of aspect here. But the Cavs did make a trade. It was the most surprising to me when it happened. I didn't see it coming. I thought that Detroit was going to sit pat, but no, they discarded Andre Drummond to Cleveland for Brandon Knight, John Henson, and a 2023 second-round pick unprotected from Cleveland or Washington. So Andre Drummond over to Cleveland, which was just it didn't make any sense to me. I mean, forget the player option worth $28.7 million. But he only played a very small sample size with Cleveland, only 8 games. And I mean, I don't know if that player meshed with anyone. Like he started shooting threes like crazy over in Cleveland, which was kind of funny. But per Clean the Glass, 12% of his shots with the Cavs have been 3-pointers, which is higher than any other year in his career. But he's not like a stretch big. He's not a Kevin Love for certain. He's definitely not even like a Larry Nance. And I don't know what shows he could be a 3-point shooter in his career aside from him taking them. He shot 28.9% before the season, before it stopped. So I don't know about that. And then also in general, I mean, his fit with these guys, yeah, he's a rebounding monster. But again, you're playing on a roster that has some ball dominant guards who are looking to create offense first and foremost for themselves, though you can obviously kind of fit in there as a rebounding, sop it up kind of big. You have a glut of bigs on the roster, and yes, Kevin Love will probably be moved, and yes, Larry Nance as well, but for the moment, this is where you're at. Tristan Thompson being a free agent, but we don't know the situation with that. He could conceivably return. Like, I don't understand the fit aside from Cleveland thinking, what exactly? Alex, help me out here.
Well, it was a talent play. They didn't have to give up a lot to get him. Andre Drummond is a name. I mean, he's a guy that people know, and you look at the counting stats and you go, oh, 17 a game, 11 boards. Here's a guy who's, blocking shots. I think he was probably top 10 in block shots this year. The analytics era has not been kind to players like Andre Drummond because you can kind of look at the stats. You see a great player on the stat sheet, and then as you start to take it apart, these stats are really empty calories. And then that's just kind of where the league has changed around him, and it's not his fault, and it's very hard to change who you are. I mean, the idea that, yes, defensive rebounding is important, but it's a threshold. The idea is, the sort of the question that you ask is this guy getting rebounds that nobody else on our team would have gotten? And with Andre Drummond, that's just not the case. Yes, he puts up these monster numbers, but the percentages kind of stay the same, whether he's on or off the court. His team rebounds just as well with him off the court as he do on the court. So, yeah, monster numbers, and he's soaking up a lot of them, but the rebound rate, the rebound percentage is not going up. Similarly, he's a good scorer. He's a guy who actually gets the line a decent bit, but he's just not creating these super efficient looks. He kind of slows the offense down. He was, for a long time in Detroit, he was very back to the basket centric. He's never really developed outside of just some flashes where he'll go for a week and have 4 assists for 3 straight games. There's not really been any passing feel developed. He's not really a big-to-big passer. So on the one hand, you got a player who was a former All-Star. You got him for a 2nd-round pick. And I 100% think when you're a team like Cleveland, whether it's a salary dump or whether it's you're using your cap space to help another team facilitate a deal, taking on these riskier talent plays is good, but you kind of got to have an idea of what to do. And I don't know that they don't. I'm not sitting in the room. I'm not saying that they just brought him on and are sitting around going, now what? But from the outside perspective, now what? I mean, you got Andre Drummond. He's got a $28 million player option. He's not, as I said, a player that necessarily is going to contribute in a super meaningful way to a winning team. He's a player who requires a lot of attention, in terms of how you run your offense. In order to be impactful, he's got to have the ball in his hands. He's got to do this. He's got to do that. He kind of fits into a specific hole. So what happens? And I think the most logical answer is this. Andre Drummond has a $28 million player option this year.
Yep.
I think more than anything, that expiring deal gives the Cavs flexibility. And we didn't really get to see it that much, but as I touched on earlier, I think that we're going to see a really trade-heavy market, or the possibility of a trade-heavy market, because of the cap ramifications of missing the last half of the season. A $28 million trade chip plus a Garland or a Sexton or a Kevin Porter gets you somewhere. I don't know what. We don't know what that is. We don't know what it's going to be it in October when we start free agency, be it in December, be it in February. But I think the idea of having Andre Drummond, who can contribute for somebody maybe down the line, or as a buyout candidate, or as X or Y or Z, having a $28 million deal to attach some assets to, if you want to go after a player, if you want to bring in I don't even have a name to throw in here, because you're not going after a Bradley Beal. But if you want to bring in a player who is in that 25 to 35% of the salary cap range, well, now you've got the most important thing, and that's the matching salary. You don't have to cobble that together. And so if that's something they're looking for, I think that's the thing to me that makes the most sense. I really don't know. Like I said, the issues are kind of all over the board with him, but that's at least something that you can hang your hat on.
I that lost me for words as far as convincing that maybe it's a fit there, at least, like you said, talent play wise and getting him on, because I was so pessimistic about that move more than anything, just because I was puzzled by it. Like, I understood. I mean, for one, you're right. You can't understate the value of having that expiring deal off the books or as a possible massive trade chip, not only with the already obvious financial implications coming up, but also with, different teams trying to make moves and limited ways of doing so with little money and free agency to pursue. But I guess moving forward with that, we have Drummond here. You have the bigs you talked about going. We have this young core that we'll kind of circle back to with some, particularly with Kevin Porter Jr. But I'm going to kind of look at some of these guys and just kind of throw a smorgasbord at you here. In my mind, the fringes of the rotation, of the team, of the future, whatever the case may be. But just going to throw them all. Ante Zizic, Dante Exum, Dylan Windler, Alfonso McKinney, of course, former NBA champion as well, Matthew Dellavedova. Do you have any thoughts on any of these guys just before we kind of go back to more of these big picture things?
Yeah, I like Dylan Windler. Windler, okay. 4-year guy at Belmont, a guy who shot like 42% on catch and shoots. He has not played a single minute in the NBA, dealt with stress fracture issue, just had to go through a lot of things. Was also the Cavs union rep on that one union call. I thought that was really funny that they picked Dylan Windler, who hadn't played a single NBA minute. But I actually really liked him coming out. I can't remember where I had him on my draft board, but he was definitely in that like borderline first round grade for me. Okay. I think he's a player who actually has a lot to contribute. Just having a catch and shoot guy opens up so many options. Having a Joe Harris, having a Duncan Robinson, a guy who maybe he doesn't put the ball on the floor, having a Klay Thompson. I mean, that's an extreme example of it, but a guy who doesn't put the ball on the floor a lot, but is automatic when he catches the ball. And I kind of think that's who Dylan Windler can be. Now, maybe he's not going to be that right out of the gate, but he's a really heady player. I think there's a lot to like in that package, and I do think he's going to contribute. I kind of like there's another guy that it may not work out, but in that sort of similar vein was Dean Wade, who had a really nice year at Kansas State, was a two-way guy for the Cavs, and possibly definitely has some skills. I mean, he can ram at home, he can really dunk, but had some spacing, can do some things, pretty good free throw shooter. I really liked him. He was a player that was on our board in the draft as well. So it's nothing. It's super exciting. Like you said, it's kind of the poo-poo platter. It's like what's left over on the buffet at the end of the night. But yeah, you can, if you pick through it, you can see some things there that are usable.
See, this is why it's such a pleasure again to have you on, Alex, because you come for Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, but you are going to get some words on Dylan Windler and Dean Wade.
Yeah.
And I knew as soon as I left, like I said up to those guys, I was like, you obviously were talking, and I'm sitting there going, oh darn, I missed Dean Wade. And I thought to the back of my head, he's gonna bring up Dean Wade. And sure enough, you bring up Dean Wade. I love it. Like, that's the detail you're getting today, y'all.
Yeah, well, draft is kind of my thing. So these were guys that I saw a lot of through the year. I mean, so I actually probably know more about Dean Wade and Dylan Windler than I do about Alfonso McKinney. I mean, I've seen him play. I've seen Alfonso McKinney play for quite a few years now, but when it comes down to like strengths and weaknesses, when I look at him, it's like, okay, I know who Alfonso McKinney was playing on Toronto and then playing in Golden State and then this year, but like, I watched Dylan Windler. I watched 5 or 6 games while he was at Belmont. I watched probably 10 or 11 games of Dean Wade play at Kansas State. So those are actually guys I know a little bit better. So I know it's kind of off the beaten path, but those are two guys that, Wade probably doesn't develop into an NBA rotation player, but there is the possibility of a guy there. And if they can get him some minutes, I mean, he played two-way. He played reasonably well in Canton this year. I thought he had a lot to contribute. So look, let me diverge and go on tangent for a second.
Oh, of course, please.
Okay, this is, as I looked into the Cleveland Cavaliers, I was just kind of looking over like what assets they'd had, what assets they traded. Okay, so they traded a pick, which made perfect sense at the time. While LeBron was still there, they traded a second-round pick to get off Richard Jefferson's contract. Okay, that second-round pick became the 41st pick in the draft. Now, the 41st pick in the draft is a complete crapshoot, and I'm not saying this is anybody's bad at drafting or bad at seeing the future or bad at anything. What I'm saying is that 41st pick in the 2019 draft became Eric Pascal. Eric Pascal played tremendously well and looks like he can be part of the rotation, Warriors rotation moving forward. And when you are a team like Cleveland, who does not have a huge market to lure free agents, doesn't really have that marquee player who's going to compete for the an all-star spot every year, you have to make every single hit count. You can't swing for home runs and miss all that often. You just have to connect on singles. You got to get guys on base, and drafting an Eric Pascal at number 41, or making a Dean Wade into a productive player, finding a Dylan Windler, getting a Kevin Porter. That's the difference in being a bottom feeder team that kind of hangs around in the lottery and building something for the future. I mean, obviously the league runs on talent, and you've got to get that top tier stuff. Now, maybe they're going to end up with maybe an Anthony Edwards turns into a perpetual all-star, a guy who's making, 6-7 all-star games and becomes the face of the franchise. But even still, when you're drafting 41, when you're drafting with this second round pick, when you're picking up free agents, when you're scouting, you got to just kind of keep getting on base when you're a Cleveland team. And that's hard to do. And that's why there are, for a lot of people in the league, there are have teams and there are have not teams. And these middle market teams kind of fall into that have not. So they have to do the things that are, they have to double down on finding value in other ways. And I think through the years, we've seen teams in smaller markets, namely the San Antonio Spurs, who turned the 57th pick into Manu Ginobili, or Toronto is a huge city, but for some reason is not a huge market, probably because you have to pay income tax in two countries. But that's another team they have just found value. You see guys that Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Nick Nurse, is a perfect example of talent, of found money. And that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say you got to just keep getting on base, keep getting on base. You got to keep getting the small things right. And the big things obviously matter because you're going to end up with a LeBron James, not very often. So you got to get those right as well. But getting the small things right just sort of sets the foundation for, we're going to continually be successful. We're going to create a mentality of success. We're going to build on a young core, and we're going to add and build out and do this and do that. And I think that's something that's, sorry to get into what my personal basketball philosophy is.
Please.
But that to me is something that, as I went through Cleveland, I thought, they haven't really connected on a lot of things. Garland, what is Darius Garland? Who is Colin Sexton? Are these contributing players? Those are still lingering questions. But a guy like Dylan Windler, maybe I made too much of him. Maybe I took up 10 minutes on Dylan Windler, but if you can get that value out of a Dylan Windler, who has basically found money when he's picked, I think he was the last pick in the first round. He was the 26th pick. If you can get found money in a rotation player out of a Dylan Windler, that's a big win for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And so I think that's over the next couple seasons, it's that honing on that focus on, like, how can we win these little transactions? How can we get a restricted free agent? How can we get player X, player Y, and eventually just build a rotation, whether it involves Sexton, whether it involves trading him, Garland, same thing. It's just consistently winning, each little tiny part of roster construction.
And see, I'm glad, again, you're giving me just another brilliant segue. Thanks so, Alex. In terms of the front office hitting singles, kind of working their way to those home runs, not making these big, boom or bust trades that usually with a team like that in those situations will go for the latter. But let's just kind of steer to the Cavs front office. We can kind of get back to Porter, the young guys, and kind of the future, the general direction. But let's kind of go on where we're at right now. We got Kobe Altman, started June 19th with firing at David Griffin, and then was made permanent on the 24th of 2017. And then you obviously had a couple coaches from that point, Ty Lue, John Beilein. What are you thinking as far as Beilein before Bickerstaff, all of the decisions there? Because Beilein was heavily a college coach, wasn't that his kind of career before coming to the NBA? I wasn't really familiar with him outside the NBA bubble, but yeah. I just thought that he didn't fit. I'm always leery of college coaches in the NBA in general because the culture is so different. But what were your thoughts on that and really on Kobe Altman in general? Let's just kind of go into the front office here.
Yeah, like I said, you got to hit singles, and Beilein he's this whole thing. I mean,
my bad. Yeah. Huh?
Beilein he's 67 years old. He's been coaching in college for 40 years. He coached at Richmond and Canassus and a million other places. Most notably coached at Michigan for 10 or 12 years, however long he was there, and took him to some Final Fours and appearance in the title game, blah, 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 blah. But the point is okay, let's step back from that for a second and say, okay, you got a young roster. You got a bunch of young guys. You got a rookie point guard. You got a second-year shooting guard. We don't really know what this team is. Okay, what do we need? We need discipline. We need somebody who's going to instill kind of this idea of, okay, this is what we do. This is how we play. This is Cleveland basketball. And that's kind of, as you sort of conjure that mental image, if you squint hard enough, that guy is John Beilein. And he is just, he's sort of the quintessential old grouchy college coach. Now, that backfired. I mean, it's plain and simple. In a major way. He didn't connect with whether it was a power dynamic, whether it was, calling people slugs or thugs or whatever it was.
Right.
That dynamic was just awful. It just didn't sit well with the young guys. It didn't sit well, particularly with the older guys, and it just never materialized as something that was going to work for them. So you kind of hit the reset button with America's interim head coach, J.B. Bickerstaff.
Right.
And Bickerstaff says, well, I'm not really the interim coach. I'm going to be the permanent coach. And I suppose that remains to be seen. Bickerstaff has been several places and never really been the permanent solution. So I think at some point you kind of have to look to that permanent solution, that next iteration of what the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to be. And, whether that's a young, maybe that's a Jay Wright from Villanova. Maybe that's an assistant who comes out of a successful organization. We've heard some Spurs names comes up. We've heard some Raptors names come up when you start looking at these head coaching searches, whether it's a guy who they pull out of British basketball like Nick Nurse. I mean, there are no shortage of good coaches. Now, the key is going to be finding a coach who's going to sort of accentuate this talent, who's going to help develop a culture, who's going to do, I said there are a bunch of good coaches. There aren't just Greg Popovich's hiding under a rock, guys who are going to instill culture overnight. And so I think, I haven't been necessarily super high on the things they've done. I thought taking Sexton probably wouldn't have been what I've done. Like I said, I saw the draw, and I understand that you want this player, you want the potential for a guy who can be a scorer. Maybe Shai Gilgeous-Alexander could have been that guy. Maybe Michael Porter. Maybe, sure. There were other guys on the board, and I think that Shai is probably the guy I go with there. Maybe Michael Bridges. I don't know. I wasn't in the chair at the time. And then the Garland pick. That's kind of that same bummer when, you're sitting there with Darius. You got Darius Garland, who may yet develop, despite being the worst player in the NBA according to VORP and PIPM and win shares and all the advanced numbers say he's number 428 of 428. There's still a player in there that is developable, but at the same time, you had a Brandon Clark sitting there, and we don't have to go into the fact that Brandon Clark went 21st when it was pretty clear there were players that could have impacted. Now, that's my personal philosophy, sort of my departure is like, I just want guys who can play ball. So maybe a Brandon Clark at age 22 is a little bit better to me than Darius Garland, who's kind of a fuzzy picture at 19. That's fine. I think the key is going forward is like, who are we? What are we going to do? What are we going to continue to develop? Who is our core? And I think making that decision, particularly in year 3 for Colin Sexton, is who is he? Is he a contributor? Is he a Cavalier who we want to build around? And then the same thing in year 2. I mean, you kind of just have to put the weight onto Darius Garland and see who he is. And then, of course, and I'm going to do a little transition for you. I love it. You get to Kevin Porter Jr. And people I've talked to love this guy. Joe Varden of the Athletics said something, and I'd kind of heard this sentiment echoed as well. He said they believe this is the guy. They believe this is a guy you can build around. And when the counting stats weren't amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but this was a player who's incredibly skilled, had great handle, could get into his jump shot, could do a lot of NBA relevant things. The one big knock on him, there were some character issues, which are so hard to get into and so hard to sort of ascertain what's the truth and what, who said this about what. But the other thing was he was really turnover prone. Now that's proven to be true. But when you look at the total package of Kevin Porter, what you see is a very good player. 6'5", got a big body, can play a little bit of the 2, a little bit of the 3, is pretty aggressive as an on-ball defender, kind of too aggressive, but in a way that when you look at him, you see, okay, that's a rookie. We can back him off. Again, he's a young guy. He's 20 years old. He showed this ability to be a catch-and-shoot guy. I mean, he shot 40% on catch-and-shoot threes. He was 74th in percentile in assist percentage. He shot 68.7% in the restricted area. Like, when you just start to get the full picture of what Kevin Porter is, you think, okay, that's a great player. In the last 15 games after Jordan Clarkson was traded, he averaged 12.3 points, which was a little bit up from his 10-point average. He also averaged 3.2 assists, which is a full assist up, and 1.0 steals. So after Jordan Clarkson got traded, he bumped up on those minutes. He kind of got to see this breath of life breathe into him, and he really took advantage, including a couple big outbursts. I think he had a 30-point game in there as well. So I really like Kevin Porter, and I know that buried the lead really late. I think if you're looking at any of these three players, it's entirely possible that the third guy they drafted is the best player, is the best combo guard of the group. I think that's very, very possible. And like I said, there's going to be a lot of soul searching to kind of figure out what this team is, but Kevin Porter has come on. He has performed. He has shown ability to do things, and that 68% in the restricted area, that kind of shooting, being able to get to the rim, being able to get to the free throw line, didn't shoot tremendously well as a shooter, as a guy off the dribble. Kind of suffered there, and of course turned the ball over quite a bit. But like I said, this is a guy that I love.
Yeah, I'm big on him as well, especially for someone being picked with the last pick of the first round and playing arguably, well, not arguably if he was one of the worst players in basketball, playing better than a guy you picked with the 6th pick overall or the 5th pick in Garland. So he definitely shown, I guess for me, a lot of the versatility. I mean, some knocks, if there were any, were that, in scoring efficiency in isolations, he was the 39th percentile, pick and roll ball handler. He was the 27th percentile, and then he was the 21st percentile in dribble handoffs. But even on the outside looking in, on closeouts, attacking those, he shot just 41%. And, this is a rookie year, so he had more turnovers than assists at that point. But at the same time, he got to the free throw line really well. And you were saying, like, I think, he drew a foul on over 10% of his drives, and that was 20th among 144 players who logged at least 200 drives last season. And I'm using that from Nylon Calculus on numbers on that. But he's someone with the size and the frame that you could see as being someone who can initiate offense, obviously create his own shot. I'm not too high on as far as college scouting, but I watched some, you obviously looked at the work done by Red Team Scouting and also looked at some YouTube videos because, I'm one of the bootleg college scouting guys. But I can say from watching those on YouTube and seeing his shooting form now, he's definitely improved his release point. It definitely looks a little bit higher. His jump shot looks a little more, I guess, compact. There was a lot of moving going around on that.
Yeah, there was. It was always pretty sweet, though. It was wrong, but it was wrong in such a way that when you looked at it, you were like, "Ooh, there's something there." And the same was very true of like his handle. He tight handle, guy could get in and out of spaces with his dribble. There are just, like you said, yeah, he's not going to be a primary initiator. He's not going to be a guy who's running 15 or 20 pick and rolls in a game, but he has some isolation utility. He's got a great handle. He knows how to get into space, and that improvement to that release point, getting that release point up high, being able to shoot and being able to get into that motion quickly, which is something he's always done, just gives him this versatility as a scorer that I think is like, he's going to be a really good player. And Corbin, I mean, we're the 55-minute mark of this podcast or
Oh,
whatever.
wow.
Maybe I'm going to say something that maybe nobody's going to hear, but I think it's entirely possible that Kevin Porter 2 seasons from now is the best player on the Cavaliers and is in that hunt for being one of the better young players on this, not just on this roster, but one of the better young guards. The kind of he'll be 23 in 2 seasons.
Wow.
If he could be one of the better young under 23 guys in the league, I don't think that's out of the question.
No, listen, I mean, whether or not they get this far, and mind you, I love these extra long pods. I think gives a lot of meat for my listeners here, so this is fine. But you better believe I will be retweeting the mess out of that quote. So they're not going to get the lead buried on that one. They're going to get that in the open and have to listen to get your backing on that. But I have another question, follow up on Porter, just from you putting a lot of work as far as scouting him and kind of seeing his play. He's not there, as you said, as someone who can run 15 to 20 pick and rolls. He's not a Luka Doncic. That's not going to happen. You see him as like a Jimmy Butler kind of, and I don't mean to do like a direct player comp, but someone who you can look at and go, okay, you know what, he can be initiator enough that we can have, let's say, a scoring guard or a couple of spacers on the floor at the guard position. And yes, we're not running the offense through him like a LeBron James or like a point forward in that way, but someone who can get them into their offense, let's say like a Brandon Ingram this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's gonna flourish beside a primary creator. I don't really see him in that Butler vein because Butler does so much initiating, particularly when he was in Philly. Like there was so much weight on him. Let me just say that I don't think that's out of the question.
Okay.
But player development like that far into the future, I don't really know. I mean, who he's going to be, what they're going to emphasize for him. I don't see him being that guy next year, but I do see him as a player who, beside a really good primary creator, somebody who can warp a defense, he's a hell of a cutter. I mean, he's explosive. He's smart. He knows how to get into space. He knows how to use his body and his physicality when he gets into space, and being able to attack a warped defense is going to make him really, really dangerous. I don't know that, we talked about at the top, like, I don't know that there is a defense warper on this roster, but I kind of see him as like that secondary option who's really kind of frightening when he gets the ball with a live bounce and you don't really know what he's going to do. Let's say like the offensive game of like a Jaylen Brown. Like a guy who is not, he's going to find 15 to 18 points a night. And you're going to go like, oh yeah, he had that one really good cut. And oh yeah, he hit that corner 3 over there. Oh, he took it off the bounce over here. Just cobbling together. And 2 of those plays, you just go like, oh yeah, that was a really good play. So that's kind of that offensive game. Now, defensive versatility, not the same ballpark, nothing like that. But when you think about that offensive game, think about a guy who can find it off cuts, can find it as a catch and shoot guy, can do a little of this and a little of that, and maybe even he had some stretches where he passed the ball pretty well. So it's not out of the question for him to be a ball mover. But I don't see him as like a primary guy, but I see him as a really strong secondary option who can put pressure on defense.
Okay. I'm totally behind that. I mean, I'm excited about Porter. With your analysis, I'm even more excited because I did have some doubts on, like you said, some of the initiating, but he definitely was the most promising of these Cavs. And speaking of that, I'm going to put you in just, I guess, a little bit of under the fire here real quick.
All right.
You're Kobe Altman here. You're looking at this roster. We've already pretty much established that, let's say, 2 years' time, we're saying that Kevin Porter Jr. is the best player in the Cavs. So that is saying that he will still be on the Cavs. Let's say you still want to keep JB Bickerstaff as the coach of the future. No, I'm playing. But moving forward, like with this team, evaluating the roster, let's just look at the young guys. I'm going to worry about the fringe. Who are you considering guys who are going to stick around? I mean, even if I'm even put this under you as far as they're under the gun, but let's say you had to pick right now between Garland and Sexton, and you could keep all of them, or you want to send everyone away but Porter. But who are you looking on this roster? Okay, you know what? This guy is going to be on the next great Cavs team, or this guy's going to be someone that the front office should want to build around or build with as a big piece.
I mean, I think Porter's the number one guy. I think my idea, if I'm sitting in this chair, is who gives us the most paths to success. Who can I put the most different lineups around and still be able to cobble together a successful team. And I think Kevin Porter's that number one guy. I think there's pretty easy to see how Kevin Porter, maybe not as the number one guy or even the number two guy, but it's pretty easy because of his size, because of his explosiveness, because of his catch and shoot ability. I think he's the easiest to just sort of form into, okay, he can do a lot of things. Beyond that, I mean, it just so much, Corbin, is going to depend on what happens in this draft. Are they going to go after a James Wiseman, a big, kind of bruising old school center from Memphis who we didn't get to see a ton of, but what we did see was a guy who, was going to use his size, going to impose himself. Maybe it is a LaMelo Ball. I mean, that's look here. That's the big thing is like, okay, LaMelo Ball probably is the best player in this class where we're sitting right now. Okay. LaMelo Ball is also a guard. I mean, if you're the Cavs and you're sitting at number one, do you take this best player available? Do you take LaMelo Ball, or do you look for an Isaac Okoro or another wing type guy who fits in beside him? And I think that's really tough. I mean, I think if I'm Kobe Altman, if whoever's Kobe Altman, if I think that LaMelo Ball is the best player in the draft and a player who has a lot of potential to be an all-star, which, you look around the NBA Twitter sphere, Sam Vecini, the guys at Draft Express,
yep.
He's really grown on a lot of people. I mean, myself included. I think there's a lot to like there. Do you give up on what is possibly the best player in the draft because he doesn't fit with your roster construction you're not necessarily in love with? I mean, that's the tough question that there is no answer to, because they have to make that decision. And from where I'm sitting, listen, we'll figure out something to do with Sexton and Garland, but if there's a LaMelo Ball on the table, maybe he's not the guaranteed home run like Luka or like Zion, but maybe, from where I'm sitting right now, as just me, I think he's the best player in the draft. So I really can't see a scenario where I pass on the best player in the draft just because it doesn't fit with my roster construction. And you kind of get into this idea of like the past sins, the sunk cost or whatever. How much are you going to let it dictate what you do in the future? And I think that's something the Cavs really have to look at is how much of this is sunk cost. Maybe none of it. Maybe they can figure out a way to do it. But I the more I watched today and the more I'd kind of just gone back over my notes and looked at it, I think there's some sunk cost here. It's just a matter of kind of figuring out which of these guys is going to be on what you said, that next great Cleveland Cavaliers team. And boy, I'm glad I don't have to decide it.
Oh yeah, no, that's tragic to me. I was gonna say you do such a great job of transitions. I was gonna make the next one. We're looking forward. We have, let's say we just keep Kevin Porter, boom, because I'm in the same mindset as you in regards to the fact that with Cleveland, wherever I'm in the draft, I'm not looking, we already have a guard here. We already have a guard there. Maybe Kobe Altman should, because you drafted two guards who essentially played the same position and neither have really stood out for, any good reason as far as, we're not nominating either of them as someone that they're both right now could easily be expendable for another guard if the shoe fits. But,
right.
That maybe for Altman, he might be forced just to protect his job. Hey, if I draft three straight point guards, this doesn't look too good for me because it's a sign that I failed in one of the two, which in my opinion, yeah, he probably did miss on that. But you're the draft expert here. Like I said, you're one of the founders of Red Team Scouting. Of course, you knew we had to use you for draft prowess. I don't want to go too deep into this because, I wouldn't be a great co-host if I didn't keep a little for you on another appearance on this show. But I wouldn't be doing my job here. But in regards to the Cavs, you mentioned LaMelo Ball. If he's available, being one of the best prospect in the draft, if the Cavs can take him, they should. You have them as a 40% chance, or according to where they are, of getting them one pick. Who are some names you don't need to throw like two or three aside from him that you could see work on Cleveland, and maybe not a perfect fit, but just someone that you're like, okay, you know what? There is a universe where a James Wiseman fits here, or where an Anthony Edwards, who I don't think fits, but Anthony Edwards can come out as the lead offensive initiator that Kevin Porter Jr. can mesh perfectly with. Like, who are some guys you see in this draft that you look at and go, okay, Cleveland might be a spot for them possibly?
Well, right off the top, if I don't mention this one name, I'll be shunned from the red team scouting Slack. So I got to start with Deni Avdija, who plays in Israel, plays for Maccabi Tel Aviv. Deni Avdija is a 6'9" kind of combo forward, figuring out what he's going to do. Really smart player, one of the best high IQ guys in this draft. Doesn't necessarily put up huge defensive numbers, but has really good positioning. I mean, I think he's averaging 1 block per 36 or something like that, but a block and a steal, something like that. So it's not spectacular numbers, but when you watch the film, he's a guy who really knows where to be. He can push the ball in the break. He has some of those guard talents. So I think that's an interesting fit. I mean, that's probably more what you're looking at if you draft in the number 4 spot versus the number 1 spot. Similarly, Onyeka Okongwu, another Southern Cal guy, kind of a rim runner, bouncy, probably the best rim protector in this class. I think that, okay, we've got 10 centers on the roster, but if Onyeka Okongwu is the guy who comes to you, I'm not super in love with drafting a rim runner, but it is a feasible option. I think it's a guy who they can explore. We talked about LaMelo Ball. And then the other guy I have to mention, one of my personal favorite players in this draft, Isaac Okoro out of Auburn, forward who hasn't really grown into his legs as a shooter just yet, but if he does, has the potential to be a point of attack defender, a guy who can tackle those big assignments night to night, a guy who gets the line a lot, so help ease that pressure by putting some pressure on the defense and being able to get into some seams and attack there. He would have to find his shot. That would be a big deal about where Okoro goes, and that's going to be one of the big deciding factors is how much do you think that's going to bother him. But kind of a guy cut from that bigger wing mold who is going to draw tough assignments night to night, going to be able to guard the point of attack pretty good team defender as well. So, yeah, I mean, it just, there's so many different options there. You got Deni Avdija, who's this kind of offensive changeling who can sort of fit in where he needs to go. And then you've got Okongwu, who's the rim runner. And then you've got Okoro, who's kind of the wing. And then you could even see a guy like Killian Hayes. I mean, Hayes probably gets Kobe Altman fired because he is a point guard, played in France this year. And played in Germany this year, but he's a guy who probably gets him fired, but he fits into the mold of he can do a lot of things. He's 6'5", he's rangy, he's got a good wingspan, he's got a good head on his shoulders, he can initiate, he can play off the ball, he can do this, he can do that. But you probably get fired if you draft 3 point guards in a row. So
I was going to say, it's a tough minefield for Altman coming up. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, listen, consequences be damned. If I'm sitting there with the number 1 pick, I probably just take LaMelo Ball and say, okay, this is the player that I think has the best chance of being an all-star. I can't live in the past, and I can't get mired down with the fact that I have a couple of combo guards. I have to figure out what to do with them, and maybe that's trade them or whatever. But if I'm sitting there with that number 1 pick, and we're still, it feels like 15 months out from the draft because it's going to happen in October this year. But that it's still without being able to see these workouts that have gone on yet, without having the one-on-ones, having the pro days and all this stuff. The information has become a little bit scarce. I mean, at this point, I've been through most of the film for most guys in the top 30. Mm-hmm. So I kind of know who they are, but that perception always starts to change in what is actually draft season. I mean, you're going to see guys kind of rise and fall on, man, did you hear he hit 15 jumpers in a row, hit 15 3-pointers in a row in a private workout, which is always confusing to me because it's like you have a body of work. Why do you just base it on the workout video? But whatever. Exactly. Anyway, a lot's going to change. I think there are a lot of different options, but, I don't envy the person who has to make that decision.
I mean, neither do I. And unfortunately, Kobe Altman already has a checkered history. He hasn't been put in the best situation, but I don't think he's also made the best of it in terms of turning it around. So it will be interesting to see what he does. We've kind of managed to go an hour and some change deep on several different areas about the Cavs in terms of future and everything going on there. Do you see a situation where they can turn it around in the next, I don't know, 2 years or so? Like as far as a like looking on them, what do you think is their ultimate future? Is it bright? Because I mean, I did a podcast recently with actually Eric, of the Timberwolves, and it was in such a weird space where they are right now, who they're building around, where it's kind of fundamentally flawed. It's like, okay, there's a universe, I'm sure, where this can work out well for this team, but as currently constructed, they can expect to be in a similar situation to slightly better or even slightly worse, in 2 years' time out. Looking at this team, what do you project them? And modestly, I mean, we're not, fortune tellers here, but like, what do you think? Is there a way that you could say, hey, they could turn it around, or do you kind of see more of the same, barring any extreme moves or roster turnover?
Well, they don't have a Karl Anthony Towns, and that's a big thing. Like they don't have an anchor point in saying, okay, this is a generational talent, or this is even just a really good player, all-star level player. That makes team roster construction a little bit cleaner for a team like Minnesota. Is like, at least we have an idea of who our best player is. Okay, so now how do we start to fill in the gaps around that? I think the hard part about Cleveland is they got to figure out who their best player is, and right now, who is it going to be 3 years from now? I said maybe it's going to be Kevin Porter, but maybe it's going to be Darius Garland, or maybe it's going to be Colin Sexton. And the problem is you just don't know. So you're drafting with so many ideas. You're signing free agents with so many ideas as to what can happen. I'm not super in love with this core. No, I think they're probably in the bottom half of the league in terms of their projection going forward. I mean, when you compare them to teams like, you got New Orleans, you got Dallas, you got Boston, you got all these teams with incredible young talent. And I kind of see Cleveland as a team with more questions than answers right now.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you. It's so much that you said, questions, that if this happens, if we're fifths, there's a saying for a reason on that. And I mean, with the overall direction, I can't say I trust Altman. I trust him out as much as I trust Bickerstaff. I guess I can just ask kind of one final question and then kind of just throw to you if you have any more topics to kind of go into. What will you be looking for next season? Obviously, Kevin Porter Jr. is a big focal point, as well as I assume whoever the Cavs draft, next year, and by next year I mean October. But what do you? Yeah, exactly. Development wise, are you interested? It's crazy.
So
I'm looking like.
Today was the draft. We're recording this on Thursday, the 25th. Today was the day of the NBA draft, and for guys like me, I mean, Estacchio, all the guys, all the great people who we were sort of adjacent to. This is the day we circle on the calendar, and it's like, okay, we work our butts off to that, and now it's just we just kind of been caught in this holding pattern for a while. I've watched these guys so much, and the draft is still like, I mean, we didn't have March Madness, we didn't have anything, like it just kind of zoned out, and now we've got 3 months till the draft. So this is going to be one of the most interesting classes in terms of coverage, because they have been picked clean. I mean, we have all watched all the film, and everybody knows all the ins and outs, and we've kind of settled into this like malaise at this point where it's like, okay, let's wait till workouts before we kind of pick this draft thing back up. But yeah, that I'm interested to see what happens. I think the biggest thing that I want to see is who's going to initiate the offense, who's going to initiate the offense, and who's going to be a focal point of the offense. And just kind of figuring out how to mesh those two things and how to make that work in a way that is conducive for the team is going to be tough. And then I think secondarily to that is like, well, what are we going to get what's our Kevin Love package? What can we get back that we like? It would not overly shock me to see him get dealt on draft day, see Kevin Love move, but I think it would be a little bit shocking. I think that, it wouldn't blow me away, but I think a lot of it's going to depend on what happens with the salary cap, and that's by no means is that set in stone at this point. And I know teams are stressing about that. So there's a world where they end up with a completely different roster to start the next season, or a completely different construction of who's playing where, and maybe we do get to see more Larry Nance at center minutes or whatever. And I think that's the most interesting thing is like, it's June 25th. Where do we go from June 25th to December 10th? And then when we get to December 10th, now what happens? Who we run our offense through? So there's a lot of really intriguing questions about this roster, and something that I think it really merits watching. I actually had a good time watching this team, and watched a couple of games, and I'll probably watch a couple more, even though I don't have to prepare for anything. It's just kind of getting my mind right as to, as we get into that draft season, that question of now who fits becomes really pertinent to what we do.
See, another example why you're the best in the biz. You're going to willingly go and watch some more Cleveland Cavaliers basketball just for the fun of it, just to wrap your head around it. I love it, man.
I just miss it, dude. I just miss basketball. I watched the Lakers. I watched that Lakers Clippers game I had it saved on my TiVo, and I just watched it like a couple of days ago, and I was like, yeah, I remember when basketball happened. That was awesome. So,
dude, it is honestly insane. I mean, I can take a brief moment to share, like, between obviously the excitement of getting ready for these pods, just so I can give an excuse to watch it, because I watch it anyway. But you're right, just watching League Pass or random ones on YouTube. I found myself watching the 1992 NBA draft on Facebook. Yes, it just popped up on my timeline. And
to Gary Payton is
yeah, I was looking at the scouting report for LaFonso Ellis and the trade the Knicks made for Rolando Blackman, and how that was going to be a big move for the Knicks.
That's the Shaq draft. Sorry, I couldn't remember if that was the Gary Payton draft or the Shaq draft.
No, I think what? But Payton, 80? I think it was 89, right? Just before, a couple years before. Not too. You weren't too off. It was right there.
Payton 90 draft.
90 draft.
92 draft. Shaquille O'Neal, Alonzo Mourning.
There we go. Yeah, and I just missed those. I was watching more like Christian Laettner, LaFonso Ellis. I heard Jim Jackson. He was talking about how Michael Jordan and others, that shooting guards didn't just have to be shooters; they could also be like initiators. It was funny to hear in the late 90s how the game was evolving even then. Like, oh, guess what? As a shooting guard, I can bring the ball up. I don't have to just shoot the ball. And I was like, wow, the game has just exploded in the last 30 years.
God, looking at that draft class, Robert Horry going 11th is criminal. Robert Horry was a tremendous player. I think we're ranked third in VORP in that class and second in win shares, all that. But yeah,
just giving me an idea. You're coming on for a mock draft.
I love it.
Like a 90s one. It's gonna happen. Well, I gotta say, I could keep talking with you for hours, man. You know, you're a lot of fun, a wealth of basketball knowledge, and I've already gobbled up an hour and changed your time. It's gonna be a great podcast for the listeners, guys. Like I said, guys and gals, in for a treat. But Alex, I'm gonna let you go tonight. I appreciate your time. Please know you'll be coming back on. I've already put it out onto the podcast universe right now, but it's gonna happen again. So be ready for that. But thank you so much for your time, Alex.
No problem.
I really appreciate that.
No problem.
And listen, you have anything to plug? Obviously, you're doing so much prep and prep work in anticipation for another, obviously, 3 months from now. But for the NBA draft, share a little bit more, just again, of the work that you do, you and Asakiel and Con. You just have such a great team, and guys who I happen to also doubly know, so it makes it even better.
Yeah, I mean, we have all branched out in different areas. I've been getting my master's degree, and Connor is full-time student coaching, and it's been a little bit of everything all over the place. Our guy Josh he moved and got a cat, and it's been a crazy time for us. But I think we're going to zero in and start focusing on the draft probably in about I want to say September. We're all kind of chilling at the moment, and because nothing's changed, like I said, because there's no workouts or anything, it's just kind of letting it ride, talking with people, kind of figuring out the stories and who likes who and all that kind of stuff right now. But probably in about September, you'll see something get fired up, and then we'll just get back to churning out the content. And you know, buddy, I'll do podcasts whenever you need me. So you just let me know.
I appreciate it, man, but that's a dangerous thing to say to me. I'll take it. I would sound like you all the time, man. But again, thanks a lot, man. It's always a pleasure with you on. And follow at Alex West Red Team. I mean, great introspective, just deep dive stuff. All right. And listen, I know he's busy right now, but one of the best guys in the biz. You'll learn a lot just by virtue of being a follower. So make sure you do that. Of course, man. And listen, if you want to get some half-baked takes from a guy who is in love with inefficient shot creation, you can follow me at Corbin NBA. I can promise that I will give you something. I don't know what that'll be, but you'll get something from me. So make sure to do that. And again, just thank y'all for tuning in. Follow Hoopball at Hoopball Tweets and at hoop-ball, or not at hoop-ball, but hoop-ball.com. We're transitioning, got big things coming down the pipeline in anticipation of the season restarting. Make sure you tune in for that. Just great NBA coverage all around, multiple team podcasts. Of course, you still get your fantasy NBA perspective, and you need that as well. So hoop-ball, hoop-ball.com, at hoop-ball tweets for the latest then. And aside from that, y'all, I'm going to talk to y'all later. Take care, keep yourself safe, and catch you on the other side. All right, y'all.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.